What's up, theology comrades? Process theology is a bit complicated. It's known for being hard to understand, and quite frankly, it's a bit intimidating. Today we're going to be talking about process theology. Some of you who know me know that process theology has been incredibly influential in some of my work. And today I'm going to be talking to you about some of the things that I think are important when unpacking this concept and idea of process theology. This topic is really big, so let's get growing. For the mathematician Alfred Whitehead, all of existence is deeply relational. To relate is at the core of all of existence. He believed that all of reality is composed of a series of events or drops of experiences that he called actual occasions or actual entities. I think he might be onto something. I mean, we can't even comprehend a world in which something can exist outside of a relationship with something else. Process philosophers believe that to relate to something is to be internally affected by that something, while simultaneously affecting that other thing. In other words, to exist is to live in a give-and-take relationship where you not only affect the world, but you're also affected by it. Because he believed that everything is in relation, not just humans, and that to be in relation means to be affected by the world as well as to have the ability to affect the world, Whitehead believed that something like subjectivity or experience runs all the way down. The idea that subjective experience constitutes the building blocks of our reality has become known as Pan-Experientialism. This notion that everything is a dynamic process of events, sensations, experiences, or decisions compared to a series of objects bouncing around in the world drastically challenges our current mechanistic understanding of how the world operates. You see, the traditional mechanistic understanding of the world that came out of the Enlightenment suggests that the world is made up of material objects that are made up of even smaller material objects. The idea is that everything can be reduced down to its parts. Like a series of billiard balls hitting one another, the object's movement can be predicted based on the mechanics of its past. In this view, the conditions of the present are always determined by the conditions of the past. Process thinkers also believe that the present is influenced by the past, but they differ in the fact that they believe that the future is always open. The process theologian Robert Mesley gives us a great metaphor to play around with when we're trying to visualize what this openness to the future might look like. He tells us that the common mechanistic understanding of the world that the church often ascribes to looks a lot like a vinyl record. On a vinyl record, you have these little stamped grooves that when you spin it and place a needle on it, it will play out the predetermined notes and melodies that were inscribed on this piece of vinyl. The record can only play what was stamped into it. Nothing more, nothing less. Some people of faith will talk about this in terms of predestination, insisting that, like the record, all of existence is created and predestined by God. But Mesley points out that process thinkers like to think about the ongoing process of time as something that looks a lot more like an improvisational jazz combo, creating as you go along. In the jazz combo, musicians are in relation to each other, creating something entirely new out of their relationship to the past, improvising based off their recollection of the previous notes and melodies. This idea that we create in the present moment by taking in certain aspects of the past is what process philosophers call prehension. For process thinkers, freedom is built into the system. While past events, decisions, and experiences limit the present moment, we always have the freedom to respond to the past in varying degrees. So if a process worldview is deeply relational, co-creative, and open to the future, how does this worldview change the way that we think about and view God? Anselm and Aquinas, two early church fathers, both insisted that God must be timeless and unchangeable. This removed God and kept God safe from the brokenness of our material reality. While one might believe that God has compassion for creation, they both insisted that this wasn't possible for God. Because if God was in relation with us, then God would have to change. And if God changed, that meant God couldn't be perfect. In this light, God became referred to as the immovable mover. Unlike this classical view, process theologians believe that God is deeply relational. Process folks believe that God is in a constant relationship with all of existence, experiencing and taking in all that is happening in the world, and simultaneously luring us into deeper relationship with God and the rest of creation. Like the improvisational jazz combo that we talked about earlier, God is constantly creating in relationship with the world, taking in the past and offering possibilities in the current moment that are creative, life-giving, and life-affirming. These possibilities are what process theologians call God's initial aim for us. It's important to note that process theologians believe that God is co-creative, always creating out of a sense of relationality, never acting coercively and never acting alone. You see, for process theologians, God is not omnipotent or all-powerful, at least not in the classical sense. If freedom, creativity, and openness are all built into the system, and humans have the ability to make choices and have agency in the world, then human beings have some power. And if human beings have some power, then God cannot or does not have all the power. Unlike Anselm and Aquinas, this places God directly in the materiality of our world. God experiences with us when we experience grief or despair or oppression, and when we experience joy or love. God takes in these experiences and draws us in each moment to choose that which reflects God's call in our lives. This means that even when we royally mess something up, God is there taking in those experiences and constantly repositioning God's self towards the world in a way that opens up new possibilities for us. This doesn't mean that God can step in and somehow unilaterally control the decisions that we make in our lives. And it also doesn't mean that somehow I can be turned into a professional baseball player overnight. However, God can and does lure us into greater creativity, freedom, and beauty. But in the end, it's up to us to decide whether or not we fulfill and live into God's calling on our lives. The first question that popped into my mind when I heard all of this was, what's keeping God from hating us? I mean, if God is so relational and experiences the world as we know it, that means experiencing everything that humans do to each other and to the earth, then what's stopping God from just giving up? Well, process folks believe that God is love, and that God's faithfulness towards creation is unchanging. They believe that there are certain aspects of God that are unchanging, what they call the primordial nature of God. Then there are certain aspects of God that are interactive, responsive, and always changing in relation to the world around us. Process theologians call this the consequent nature of God. To use an example, someone who is in a committed relationship with another person will inevitably change in light of new experiences with their partner. The way that their partner brushes their teeth may drive them absolutely crazy. And the way that they eat spaghetti may make them want to live in a cave for eternity. But ideally, their love for one another will draw them into deeper relationship with one another, not allowing them to overlook their problems, but to engage their problems and attack them head-on in relationship with one another. In the same way, God is faithful to creation, constantly drawing us near and providing us with new possibilities that reflect God's call on our lives. As you can see, process theology is a bit complicated, but it opens up new ways of talking about God that significantly challenge the way that we currently view the world. Process theology transforms the way that we look at our relationship with God and the world. It radically changes the way that we view prayer and worship and even love itself. The God of process theology is not one who wields power over us, but one who invites us to co-create with God a new world. God is that which draws us to love our neighbor, to pray for our enemies, and to join hands with one another in an attempt to create a more beautiful world. If you want to continue learning more about theology, make sure that you like this video and that you hit the subscribe button in the link below. I have several links in the description below that link to Thomas Ord, Monica Coleman, Tripp Fuller, and several other people talking about some of these concepts that we've talked about in this video. Make sure you check them out. I'll see you guys next time on Theology Matters.